So this might very well be my favorite talk of the year. And every year I like what I did last year with it, so I just pull it out and I'm thinking we're going to do that again. But this deeper consideration thing that's part of this title gets in the way, so I dig even deeper. So every year this evolves and really grows, and I hope that you enjoy how it grows. And if you haven't ever heard it before, I hope you enjoy this. The reason, or the thing that started this whole process of taking the Christmas story deeper was because Ernest Holmes had a beautiful quote that I fell in love with. And I don't have the exact quote, but what he told us in this quote was that when we consider the Bible and all of its teachings as a personal and inner journey, we come to understand a deeper meaning and a deeper guidance that is available through it all. And the Christmas story, to me, is absolutely beautiful. Even if you don't believe in the religious doctrine around it, it's a beautiful story. And there are several other religions that have very similar stories. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today what we're going to talk about is the Christmas story looking deeper, taking that personal inner journey. Now, what I want to preface this with is, if you are a firm believer in the historical facts of this story, of the Christmas story around Jesus' birth, this deeper consideration does not take away from that in any way. If you allow it to, that's your choice. That's not my intention here. Leave that Christmas story as historically true if you choose to. But this deeper consideration actually expands on what was said, what was taught, what the story tells us. So today we're going to look at that, and we're going to begin with the angels. See, the Christmas story is full of all kinds of symbols. Whether you believe it historical fact or whatever, it's full of symbols. And the first one was the angels that approached Mary and Joseph at different times, of course, before Jesus was ever born. These angels appeared before Mary and Joseph, and most of us envision angels as these beautiful, like this right over here, and the camera can't see it, but this angel over here with the wings, the shining, the radiating light, the goodness, the love, and the peace. But what I want to point out here, these angels approached Mary and Joseph and told both of them, first things out of their mouth, do not be afraid. So, this tells us something. This tells us that angels don't always show up as these beautiful, radiant beings. They show up to us in ways that we can be fearful, which tells me the messages that we receive throughout life can show up in many different forms, many different stages of our life. They can bring us all kinds of messages, and if we're afraid, we are not going to get the message. Their first words, fear not. We have to push that fear aside. And when that fear does show up in our lives, it may be a very good thing for us to just call a time out. Step back from the fear. What's the message? Now, most of you know if a snake came crawling on that door, the fear in me is going out the door. Okay? Yeah, I'm not waiting on none of you. But for the most part, fear is something new coming in. It's future events appearing real, false evidence appearing real. Okay? We've talked about it before. There's only two real fears, only two fears that we're born with. Loud noises, falling backwards. Everything else is something we learned. So the angels tell us, fear not. That in itself is one of the most beautiful messages of the Christmas story. But it doesn't stop there. The angels showing up as they did even before Mary became pregnant, tells us that God is already at every point along the journey. We are not alone. We don't face this life by ourselves. The presence of God is omnipresent, everywhere, always, infinite. We cannot be anywhere that God is not. Partly because God is within us. Mostly because God is universal, infinite. The birth of Jesus represents the awakening of the Christ mind. That's very important. The historical fact is that Jesus was born. The deeper understanding, the deeper consideration is the Christ mind that Jesus represented, was revealed. The Christ mind is God. There is one mind. So it's already everywhere present, always, forever, infinite. It's already there. The birth of Jesus as a human being who could understand the Christ mind and represent and demonstrate the Christ mind is the miracle here. And a miracle is simply something that we've never seen before. It's not like, poof, here's something new. That's not a miracle. A miracle is the revelation of something that has been that we have just never noticed. The Christ mind has always been, always will be Christ, or Jesus, born as that infant, showed the world. It's here. It's available. It can be used. We can be in relationship with it. It's not reserved just for the angels. When people talk about this in many religions, they talk about you must be reborn, which is kind of funny to me because they talk about Jesus being born that one time 2,000-something years ago, and they talk about you have to be reborn. Well, Jesus wasn't reborn, he was born. It's just always there. But anyway, this born is not about the physical rebirth, and it's not even about the spiritual rebirth. See, this is where we get messed up. We think, oh, now I've got to become a spiritual being. I've got to act like a spiritual being. We're already spiritual beings, just having a human experience. What this is about is it's about being mentally reborn. See, we've got all of these thoughts, like those fears we talked about. We have trained ourselves to think a certain way based on how our life has developed and presented itself. What we're talking about in this rebirth, this that Jesus represented, is the mental rebirth. It's a change in our thinking. It's aligning our thought process with the truth of our spiritual existence. It's awakening our thought process to the Christ mind that is already available. How do these thoughts align with the Christ mind? There was a saying many years ago, and I guess maybe it's still there, I just haven't heard it in a long time, is, what would Jesus do? Well, if we tweaked that a little bit and said, what would Christ do? That would be an incredible statement for us to have on hand, so that anytime we get in a situation, what would be the Christ response to this? and then align our thinking, align our reactions, our responses accordingly. That would be absolutely incredible. Jesus' birth occurred in conditions that many of us would just, and it would be appalled at. In a manger where the livestock were. Have you ever walked into, in a stable where the livestock, have you spent any time in a stable? It's not very pleasant. Not at all. And most of the stables I've been in had horses. And to me, that's one of the cleanest of all the animals. But when you bring in the goats and the pigs and the cows when you add it all up, it's kind of rough. It's not a place that you would want a newborn baby to be born in. Much less this Christ that's going to show us and be an example for us of a whole lot of really cool things. The manger that Christ was laid in, at that time, mangers were carved out of stone. In that area of the world, they were carved from stone, and the best of the livestock were kept there. So we put a goat in here last week, and now we're going to put this kid. This whole thing, all of this adds up to an insignificant birth. But it wasn't. It wasn't. We know it wasn't because, according to facts, we had visitation from the shepherds, from the wise men, and we're going to talk about them here in a minute. So, what was going on here? How did this happen? Jesus radiated the Christ within him. He radiated in such a way, even as an infant, even not being... How many infants do you know that are cognizant enough to decide, I'm going to demonstrate this today. I'm going to demonstrate this, and I'm going to do this. No. A baby is looking for food, looking for nurturing, looking for love. Christ was radiated from that child. Folks, the Christ that radiated from that child is the same Christ that is God within you. Jesus told us later in life, I have nothing that you don't have. If we're going to believe that Jesus, the Christ, was the answer to all, then how can we call him a liar on that? We have to take what Christ said as truth or a lie. You have the Christ within you as well. The details of Jesus' birth tell us that it's not the beginning that matters so much. He was born in a manger, in a stable, placed in a manger, surrounded by livestock. For most of us, that kind of set the tone for our whole lives. Many of us would question, are we worthy of anything better? Is there more? Anything else? It's not the beginning that matters. It's what we do as we go forward. So even if you have never entertained the idea that you have the Christ mind within you, that Christ consciousness that is the direct connection to God, if you have never entertained that thought before, this is your beginning. The beginning doesn't matter. It's what you do from here. Jesus proved that through his life. Born in that stable, laid in that manger, fully radiating the Christ consciousness. Yet, he didn't stop there. We know as he went through life, he continued his studies. Studied with the Jewish, the rabbis, studied with the Hebrews, he continually studied more and more and more. It wasn't because he was studying to gain something else. He was studying so that he too could open awareness more fully of the Christ consciousness within him, of the relationship with God that was within him. See, it's not about just saying, okay, I get it. It's not about just, I figured it out, I'm done. This is about the continual opening of awareness. That's what Jesus showed us as he grew up. We all have this Christ mind. It is infinite, just as God is, and that's what our goal, that's what our job in this life experience is to figure out, to open awareness to just how beautiful that is within us. Jesus also told us it is done as you believe. So the more we expand our awareness, the greater it is done. Think of any situation you've ever faced, any situation you might face. If you go in that as your only path, you're going to have one outcome. If you go in there believing you are a spiritual being, completely connected and open to the Christ mind, and you have that thought process, you're going to have a totally different outcome. This all comes back to, because all of this is new learning. All of this is new experience. This comes back to what the angels told us. Fear not. Fear not. If you move forward believing that you are one in God, horrible happens, you're still one in God. If you move forward thinking you are only human and something horrible happens, you lost it all. The next symbol in this message was the star, and we're going to do the rest of these pretty quick because I've already touched on several of them. But the star is the light of God within. It is the light revealing the Christ consciousness within. The light shines as a beacon to remind us of our truth. Now, the beautiful thing about it is as we recognize that light, as we embrace that light starts radiating from us as well. You can walk into a room and see somebody completely across the room full of people and notice something special about them. That's what this radiating energy or light, whatever you want to refer to it, that's what this is. We all see it. It's just sometimes we tune into it, sometimes we don't. But it's the light within you that is God that is radiating from you. The stable, as we talked about, is it's actually the relationship of God with all of creation. That message from the stable says that God is everywhere present. You know, up until that time, if you wanted to speak to God, you had to go to the tent. You had to talk to the rabbis or the priests. They went and talked to God for you. This birth in this place told us God is present and available right here, right now. We no longer had to go through a mediator. God was already here. God was available. The shepherds represent the protection and the guidance of God. You know, we hear many stories throughout the Bible of the shepherds tending their flocks, leading them to water, nurturing them, finding food, just taking care of them. That's what they represent here. The Christ mind is what nurtures us and takes care of us, provides for us. We don't have to wait for the dude with the long staff and hooked staff to come over here and say, okay, I'll take care of you from now on. That's already within us. That's what this Christ mind is the protection and the guidance that we all seek, but it's already within. The wise men represent wisdom. Now, it's important to note there is very little explanation about who these guys were. It doesn't say they came from this place, it just said they came from the east. This is kind of significant here. This tells us the universal presence of God. Because you think this all took place in in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. East of that is India and Asia. What this is telling us is that chances are the wise men coming from the East were either of Buddhist beliefs, religions, or Hindu. Most people think that I'm a Christian, oh my gosh, they're wrong. If there is that much separation, there is no way that Hindu and Buddhist would have come to celebrate the birth of the Christ mind. Unless they already believed in the Christ mind and called it something else. But this tells us that the presence of God is universal. Hindus make God one thing. Our friend that shows up here every once in a while, he constantly reminds me that his religion calls God Allah, because he's Muslim, Islam. And what I know to be true is there is one God. There is one. What he calls Allah is the same as I call God. What Hindu call, and I can't remember what they call God. I'm sorry for any Hindu people watching the video. It's one God. And we've created these stories and these beliefs and these rules around what we think God is. But the presence, the universal presence of God led these people of different beliefs to come in showing that there is one. There is one, the Christ mind. And again, we call it the Christ mind. Other religions may call it something totally different. It's the same. It's just our interpretations of it, our belief systems that make it different. And often we let those beliefs in something different create war. We've got to come together and realize the oneness of God. Now, along in this story, there are also many perceived evils. These represent the hurdles and the blocks that stand before us, and when we allow it, they prevent us from living. They prevent us from knowing truth. If you run into a hurdle or a perceived evil, fear not. Step back, look at it, take a deeper consideration of what this may be. The God presence is everywhere, in everything. We have the challenge and the opportunity to recognize God's presence in all. We must remember Christmas is a reminder to awaken to the Christ mind within. And it's not just this time of year. The Christ mind is not available just between December 5th and 25th. It's available all year long. It's just this time of year we're reminded about it. It's more open. So look within. and awaken the Christ within you. Let's pray. Father God, we are so grateful that we can experience this Christ consciousness right here, right now, always. Through this awareness, we can more fully experience the omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience in us and through us. We ask today that our awareness and understanding of Christ consciousness within and every experience it, knowing the perfection of the Christ consciousness is already available. Let us more fully awaken to its presence. Assist us in releasing all that stands in our way of completing in our awareness of the truth within us. Let us open our minds and hearts to the Christ mind within that reveals these truths. Knowing this prayer is already made manifest and need to only open our hearts and minds to receive it, we say thank you. And so it is. Amen.